So the survival rework is great so far in the beta, but the spec tree still leaves a lot to be desired. As it is right now in the beta, both hero trees play almost the exact same build, with the only differences being moving points around the 2-point nodes that buff bombs or buff raptor strike. There's almost no build variety with the amount of bad or weak talents that exist in survival. All of the Flamefang Pitch talents and Shower of Blood are the most egregious examples, but these aren't the only issues with the talents right now. So I want to start off with Flamefang Pitch. This spell is really cool thematically, but it's just very annoying. This is a ground targeted AoE, and it leaves an AoE on the ground that mobs can just run out of, and it also has a 1-minute cooldown. A 1-minute cooldown on what is essentially just a slightly stronger Wildfire Bomb that also places a ground AoE just feels really bad, and we just dealt with this issue with Lunar Storm in the War Within, and Lunar Storm was addressed by increasing the radius and making Lunar Storm move. This same issue existed with Death and Decay, Wild Spirits, and Soulforge Embers, just to name a few issues. The problem is that we now have no control over mobs or bosses that can just be moved, or move themselves, out of the AoE effect of a spell with a long cooldown. Bosses like Soul Hunters and Nexus King Saladar are constantly moving and they won't stay inside Flamefang Pitch for the full duration. Other bosses this expansion have had this issue as well. In Nerebar Palace, several bosses were constantly moving. You had Sic Em, Ovanax, Kaiveza, and Silken Court as just some examples from just that raid where bosses or ads are constantly moving out of ground effects. And just for reference, here's what the Flamefang Pitch AoE effect looks like. It's this tiny ground effect, and not only can you barely see it mid-combat with all the other spell effects that are going off, but other players can't be able to see it as well. And it's just such a small radius that enemies can simply move out of. Outside of the frustrating gameplay of Flamefang Pitch, it's also incredibly undertuned, and I'll show a log right after this just to show off what I mean. And for something that requires heavy investment into the talent tree and being capstone talents, they just don't perform. And you have to give up some very powerful talents to even get these capstones, like Grenade Juggler and Wildfire Imbuement aren't doing very much, and they're competing with really strong capstones like Flanked, and Lethal Calibration, and Primal Surge. And then because Flamefang Pitch is so undertuned, it also makes other talents never worth taking. So we have this choice node, where you pick between Vulnerability and Blackrock Munitions. Blackrock Munitions increases the critical strike damage of Wildfire Bomb and Flamefang Pitch. But you would never take this choice node as it is because Flamefang Pitch just does no damage. So you would always take Vulnerability, which increases Raptor Strike and Boomstick damage. And if you've played Survival or if you've seen Survival logs in the beta, Boomstick's doing a lot of damage. And Raptor Strike and Raptor Swipe are also putting in work. So why would you give up this node to take Wildfire Bomb and Flamefang Pitch damage when half of this node is useless because Flamefang Pitch is useless? This node might be cool if Flamefang Pitch did damage, but it just doesn't. And this choice node is a trap because of that. There's also another choice node in the Sentinel tree, where you're picking between Stargazer and Open Fire. Stargazer itself is really strong. With Stargazer, every time you consume Tip, you're getting a stacking 2% increased critical strike damage buff. And that's a lot. Like, we're getting extra crit scaling as Sentinel. And this applies to all of your damage. And then the choice node is Open Fire. And Open Fire increases Flamefang Pitch damage by 15%. Because Flamefang Pitch is so bad right now, this talent is just dead. Like, why would you take this talent to buff Flamefang Pitch when Flamefang Pitch doesn't do damage to begin with? Like, even if Flamefang Pitch did do damage, this would need to be an incredibly strong talent to compete with Stargazer. Another issue is that you have talents that are supposed to interact with Flamefang Pitch talents, but they actually end up clashing. So let me show you what I mean. So we have Wildfire Imbuement down here, and with Wildfire Imbuement, your auto attacks are dealing extra fire damage. This would mean that attacking faster would give you more Wildfire Imbuement procs. Well, to attack faster, you need to spec into Bloodseeker. Bloodseeker procs from having bleeds up. So to proc Bloodseeker, you need bleeds. Bloodseeker does work off of external bleeds, so if there's another bleed spec in your group, this following part won't be an issue. But if there isn't a bleed spec in your group, you need to spec into Shrapnel Bomb. To take Shrapnel Bomb, you have to give up Flame Break, and Flame Break buffs all fire damage. Shrapnel Bomb's a bleed, and this has no interactions with Sentinel, and it barely has interactions with Pack Leader as well, but right now I just want to talk about Sentinel. So to take Shrapnel Bomb, you would have to give up Flame Break, and Flame Break would be buffing Flamefang Pitch. And I just find it really odd that to get the most value out of Wildfire Imbuement, you need to spec into Shrapnel Bomb and Bloodseeker, which means giving up Flame Break, and Flame Break would buff Flamefang Pitch. So you're already like losing fire damage and making Flamefang Pitch weaker just to get more value out of Wildfire Imbuement. Like, these kind of clash, like, that doesn't make sense to me. And now really quickly I want to show a log. So this log is going to show off the ideal scenario for Flamefang Pitch. It's a sustained 5 target AoE, 5-minute target dummy test. And target dummies can't move out of Flamefang Pitch because they're target dummies, and this is the ideal scenario for Flamefang Pitch. Also, really quickly before showing the log, I just want to show the talent swaps that I made to pick up Flamefang Pitch. So like I mentioned earlier, like, picking up Flamefang Pitch is pretty expensive, talent point wise. I had to lose Savagery, which is 30 seconds off the takedown CDR, and I also lost Flanked, which makes takedown do a lot of damage in AoE. And those are some really strong talents, and Flamefang Pitch and Grenade Juggler are not carrying their weight to make it worth losing these talents. But also to give Flamefang Pitch the best fighting chance, I made some other talent swaps. So I moved Vulnerability over to Blackrock Munitions, and Blackrock Munitions increases the critical strike damage of Flamefang Pitch by 20%. I also went into the Sentinel tree and I picked up Open Fire to increase all Flamefang Pitch damage by 15%. And then I always have this talent to Sentinel, but I'm running Flame Break as well just to make sure all fire damage is increased by 8%. And those are the talents I was running for this. So now I want to show this Flamefang Pitch log. Also, I lied. This is over 6 minutes, not 5 minutes. Whatever, same thing. But also, before getting into it, this is running with the ideal Flamefang Pitch talents, so taking all the talents that buff Flamefang Pitch. This is also against 5 targets sustained, and these targets are target dummies, so they can't run out of Flamefang Pitch, so the dot is doing the max damage that they possibly can. So remember, Flamefang Pitch is a capstone talent, and it takes a lot of talent point investment to get. And you can see here, this is the initial hit of Flamefang Pitch, doing 2.28% of my damage, and this is with me tipping every single Flamefang Pitch and casting it during takedown to give it the most damage possible, and it's only doing 2.28%. And this is the dot down here, and it's doing 1.56% in an ideal scenario where all the mobs can't run out of it. Like, is this not pathetic for a capstone talent that takes a lot of talent point investment? Like 2.28% and 1.56%. That's not even 4% for 2 talent points. And then if we were to go and look at average cast, like the initial hit of Flamefang Pitch is doing less damage than the average cast of Wildfire Bomb. And this is what I mean by saying Flamefang Pitch is like a weaker Wildfire Bomb on a 1-minute cooldown. Like you have the initial hit of Wildfire Bomb hitting for 211k, but you have the initial hit of Flamefang Pitch hitting for 236k. Like that's barely higher, and it has a 1-minute cooldown. Like why is this barely doing more damage than Wildfire Bomb if it has a 1-minute cooldown? Like it just doesn't make sense to me. It is so undertuned. But you can also see here, here's my overall DPS. It was 201.5k. And if I were to go, and here's the log for running normal Sentinel talents, and I was doing nearly 217k running normal talents. That's a pretty big difference. Like 201.6k versus 217k. Flamefang Pitch is so undertuned right now, and I'm not sure why this talent hasn't been touched. Like it's been how many weeks since Alpha started, and Flamefang Pitch has seen no changes? It's technically even been nerfed because the original iteration of Flamefang Pitch was a 30-second cooldown, but now it's a 1-minute cooldown. So this is half as good as what it used to be. And it's still weak. I'm not sure what's going on with Flamefang Pitch, but something has to change with this talent. I do think it's a shame that Flamefang Pitch is so weak because thematically it's kind of cool, and it's also kind of fun to play with. Like it gives you more buttons to press because with Grenade Juggler you're getting an extra bomb every time you cast Flamefang Pitch. So if you like pressing more buttons, like that's pretty fun. But there's also a really cool node tied to it, like Wildfire Imbuement. Like you throw Flamefang Pitch, and then you and your pet are set on fire, and you're dealing extra fire damage. Like if something were to change with Flamefang Pitch, like say this was reworked entirely and it was changed into something else, I really hope that Wildfire Imbuement can stay around in some form, because I think thematically this is sick, and I hope it stays. So now I want to talk about Shower of Blood and the entire bleed package. And the entire bleed package just feels like leftovers of an internal build where survival was a bleed-based spec, but these changes were scrapped. So I'm not sure what was going on with these abilities, but when the Midnight Alpha went live, there were some data mined bleeds for survival that didn't make it live. Merciless Blows still existed, but it was nerfed from its live version, and it still exists in the spell data, and you can see it. There's also a version of Flanking Strike that turned into an ability called Rupturing Blow, which dealt large damage and it scaled based on all the bleeds present. I'm not saying that these were ever intended to go live, but there is something happening internally where a bleed-based survival was considered, and it feels like the remaining bleed package was designed with these scrapped bleeds in mind, and it's why the bleed package is so lackluster. So let's take a look at these bleed talents really quickly. So to start off, we have Shower of Blood. This is a 2-point node, so it's already expensive by default. And it's a 2-point node that makes your bleeds deal 16% increased damage. But the bleeds that we do have as survival don't do any damage. Like we have Sic Em right here, and Sic Em is gating Shower of Blood. So you have to take a really weak bleed to begin with to even take Shower of Blood, because Shower of Blood is blocked by Sic Em. Sic Em does 962 damage over 5 seconds with my current gear. Raptor Strike does 9300. That is quite the difference. That is 10 times lower. Sic Em just doesn't do any damage. Then we have Shrapnel Bomb as a bleed. Shrapnel Bomb also does no damage. Shrapnel Bomb turns a periodic portion of Wildfire Bomb into a bleed. And this doesn't do any damage, like it only exists as a Bloodseeker trigger. So Bloodseeker gives you increased attack speed for every bleeding enemy. But without Shrapnel Bomb, Survival has no way to actually proc this by themselves. So you need Shrapnel Bomb to trigger Bloodseeker, unless you're playing with the spec that applies bleeds. But even with this No Mercy talent in Pack Leader, like this talent increases bleed damage by 20%. But Shrapnel Bomb still isn't doing any damage if you buff that by 20%. It's buffing a small number by 20%, which doesn't matter. We also have the Rend Flesh bleed. So Pack Leader has the Bear, and the Bear spawn does an ability called Rend Flesh, and Rend Flesh does some AoE damage. But this is nerfed compared to War Within, and it's really weak. But there's also a talent called Sharpened Claws, which buffs the damage of Rend Flesh. But even with that talent, and with Shower of Blood, and with No Mercy, Rend Flesh is still doing like 2 to 3% of your damage. Like, I'll show this off in a log after this. Like, I did a log similar to Flamefang Pitch, and I'll show it after this and show the talent swaps that I made. But your bleeds just aren't doing any damage. And not only do these bleeds not do any damage, but they also don't have any gameplay implications. Like, you would think, okay, bleeding enemies give you attack speed increase, and maybe that would matter. But it doesn't. Lunge used to give you Wildfire Bomb CDR in War Within, but that's gone, so there's no auto attack interactions there. Now, Pack Leader does have Lethal Barbs, and Lethal Barbs causes you and your pet to gain 2 focus every time you auto attack. So in theory, like, dual wielding would give you and your pet a lot of focus, and you would think that matters. But it doesn't, because Pack Leader and Survival in general was just buffed last week. Like, we got extra pet damage, and Kill Command was buffed. And it seems like because of those changes, you want to tip every single ability. And because you're tipping every single ability, your focus basically doesn't matter, especially as Pack Leader. Like, you're frequently overcapping focus just because you want to tip your spells. So this focus regen from Lethal Barbs doesn't matter. You're not gaining anything from auto attacks, you're just getting more auto attack damage. So it's entirely passive, there's no gameplay implications, and I'm not sure what bleeds are trying to accomplish in the build right now. In my opinion, Survival needs some type of strong bleed for this bleed package to even be worth taking. I think Shower of Blood needs to be reworked entirely if there's no other like significant bleed added to Survival. So with all that in mind, I also want to show off some dummy testing AoE logs for the bleed build. So similar to Flamefang Pitch, I changed my talents around, and I tried to give bleeds the best fighting chance. So I'm running Shrapnel Bomb, I'm running all the talents that buff Bomb, so Shrapnel Bomb does more damage. I'm running Sic Em, I'm running 2 points in Shower of Blood, so my bleeds do more damage. I have Sharpened Claws, so my Bear bleed does more damage. And I'm playing Pack Leader, so I have No Mercy, so my bleeds also do 20% more damage. And then lastly, I have Blackrock Munitions, which gives Wildfire Bomb 20% increased crit damage. Like, it doesn't do anything for Flamefang Pitch, so you would never take this talent to begin with, but I just want to show off how weak bleeds are, even in the ideal scenario. And similar to the Flamefang Pitch tests, I had to give up some really good talents to pick these. Like, I'm missing Savagery, I'm missing Flanked, I'm missing Sweeping Spear, I'm missing Bloody Claws, I'm missing either Mongoose Rounds or Wildfire Shells. Like, those are some really strong talents, and you had to give up those really strong talents to pick some talents for bleeds that aren't strong to begin with, and they're just really boring to play with. So here's the log for a Pack Leader AoE bleed build. And it's going to be the same scenarios as the Flamefang Pitch tests. So this is against 5 targets, it's the target dummies, and it's over 6 minutes. I lusted on pull, I used the DPS pot on pull, and I'm also going to compare this to normal Pack Leader AoE play after this. And that normal Pack Leader log is also going to have the same things, like I lusted on pull, I used a DPS pot on pull, and it's also over 6 minutes. I'm also not entirely sure if what I was running was the best talents for a bleed build, but I did take every single talent that would buff bleeds, so that's the most important thing, and I just want to show off how little damage the bleeds do, even when you're fully supporting them. So the first thing I want to look at is Sic Em. So if we ignore this random proc at the bottom, we have Sic Em, and Sic Em is my lowest damage right now, and is doing 0.44% of my damage. Now, Sic Em technically is a single target ability, like it only puts the dot on one target, but even in single target, it's barely doing damage, like it's doing maybe 1% of your damage on single target. And that's considering like running Shower of Blood, which buffs it by 16%. Like, this is doing no damage for the investment that we're putting into it. We also have the bleed from the Bear. We have Rend Flesh. Rend Flesh is doing 2.22% of my damage. And again, this is taking the choice node in Pack Leader that's buffing it by 15%. And it's also taking Shower of Blood, which buffs it by 16%. And even with those talents, this isn't doing any damage. Like 2.22% of my damage. That is kind of embarrassing for wanting to run a bleed build. And then our third and final bleed is Shrapnel Bomb. So I know it says Wildfire Bomb, but just know this is the periodic portion of Bomb, and it's Shrapnel Bomb. So this is a bleed, and it's getting buffed by Shower of Blood, so this is getting buffed by 16%. It's also getting buffed by No Mercy because we're playing Pack Leader, so it's doing 20% more damage from that as well. And even with everything buffing it, like I'm also taking Wildfire Bomb talents to buff this damage even more, and it's still doing no damage. So if we were to add up all of our bleeds, so we have Shrapnel Bomb here at 8.64%, then we go to the Bear, and we have the Bear's bleed doing 2.22%. So that's basically 10%. And then if you add in Sic Em, like it's a little over 10%. So all of that talent point investment going towards bleeds. And bleeds aren't even doing 10% of our damage. Like, what are we doing here? How is a bleed build doing 10% of your damage as bleeds? Like, I don't think that even makes any sense. And really quickly, for a comparison, this is doing 193k DPS. And this isn't a lot, because I'm going to pull up this Pack Leader log really quickly. And this is the log for normal Pack Leader AoE gameplay, not running a bleed build. And you can see down here, I'm doing almost 220k DPS. And the same things apply as before. Like I lusted on pull, I used my DPS spot on pull. But 219.2k, and like running the normal bleed build, I'm doing 193k. Like that is significantly less. Like right now, running bleeds and taking all these bleed support talents are just trolling your damage, because bleeds don't do any damage to begin with. And why are you trying to buff bleeds when they don't do damage? Like you might as well be sending those talent points into the void, because your bleeds just suck. So why would you spec into them and try to buff something that doesn't do damage? Like it just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe this looks a little more appealing. Like if you were to compare them side by side, maybe it looks a little better, but not really, because I mean, you have the non-bleed build here on the left doing 220.7k DPS, and then you have the bleed build on the right doing 192.9k. Like, look at that gap. Look at that difference. Like, the bleed build is just making your damage lower for no reason, and you have to give up some really good talents as well to make the bleed build actually work. Because like Shower of Blood is a 2-point node, and a 2-point node is pretty expensive. And it's a 2-point node that doesn't buff anything because your bleeds just suck. So I'm not sure what we're doing with the bleed build. Like, bleeds in general need help with survival. They're in dire need of attention. Having bleed talents be this weak really limits our build variety because we don't have any choices to put our talents into. Like if bleeds are this bad, there's no variety. We're all running the same build no matter what for every single scenario. Lastly, I want to quickly cover some other problematic talents. Now these aren't as egregious as Flamefang Pitch and the bleed package, but they are still problematic and they're limiting build variety, so I'd like to see them changed. The first one's going to be Twin Fangs. Twin Fangs cause a takedown to give you 3 stacks of Tip of the Spear, which might sound cool, but you're pressing takedown once a minute. We have a talent that's basically mandatory called Primal Surge. And with Primal Surge, Kill Command grants 1 additional stack of Tip of the Spear. So anytime you press Kill Command, you get 2 stacks of Tip and not just 1. So why would you talent into Twin Fangs, which gives you 3 stacks once a minute, when you could just press Kill Command and get 2? And not only that, but Twin Fangs technically doesn't even give you 3 stacks of Tip. Since Twin Fangs causes Takedown to give you 3 stacks of Tip, but Takedown can also be buffed by Tip, one of these stacks buffs Takedown, so you end up with 2 stacks of Tip instead of 3. Honestly, it feels like Twin Fangs is something that should just be baked into Takedown baseline. Like getting 3 stacks of Tip is not that strong, when I could just press Kill Command with Primal Surge and get 2 stacks of Tip. Like getting 3 stacks of Tip once per minute when you take down would just be a nice quality of life thing. Like it's not that big of a deal, this is a waste of a talent point, and I would love to see this like change into something else to actually be more impactful and actually give us something to spec into, because as this stands, we would never run this talent. Another issue right now is with Pack Leader, but more specifically, it's with Hogstrider, Hoof and Blade, and Hatchet Toss. So Hogstrider causes your next Hatchet Toss to deal 200% increased damage, and every mob hit by your boar causes it to hit more targets. So there's already an issue with this. Buffing Hatchet Toss by 200% isn't worth casting on single target. Like, it does less damage than Raptor Strike, and Raptor Strike is your filler. Hatchet Toss doing less damage than Raptor Strike just means you're never going to cast it because it's weaker than your filler. But not only that, but even in AoE, when your boar is hitting more targets and causing Hatchet Toss to hit more enemies, it's still not worth casting. Like, if I were to go to this log, and if I were to look at Hatchet Toss, I had 7 boar spawns, and I had 7 Hatchet Toss casts, and it does 0.79% of my damage. This is almost nothing. And you can see, like, if I were to look at average cast, like, you might think it does okay, like it's doing 89.5k. But if I'm pressing Hatchet Toss, that means I'm doing less Raptor Swipes, because I could be pressing Raptor Strike and turning that into Raptor Swipe, which does double the damage. It does more than double the damage of Raptor Swipe. And if you were to average the damage between Raptor Swipe and Raptor Strike, and get that average cast, and compare it to Hatchet Toss, it's not worth pressing Hatchet Toss. So why does this exist? Like, what are we doing? Why are we even pressing Hatchet Toss? It's not worth pressing at single target. It's not worth pressing in AoE. Like, something really needs to be done with that. And not only that, but there's another issue. Since Hatchet Toss is so weak, this choice node is useless. Hoof and Blade. So Hoof and Blade buffs Hatchet Toss and buffs Hogstrider even more. So with Hoof and Blade, Hogstrider further increases the damage of Hatchet Toss by 50% and now strikes up to 3 additional targets. But who cares? Because look at this choice node that it's up against. The damage bonus from your Wyvern is increased by 5%. That's 5% more damage to everything. Why would you buff Hatchet Toss, which is doing 0.8% of your damage, by 50%? That's nothing. Now it's doing 1.2% of your damage. Who cares? You can just take Wyvern's Gaze and buff all your damage by 5%, instead of increasing 0.8% of your damage by 50% and doing 1.2% of your damage instead of 0.8% of your damage. Like, this is trolling. I don't know why you would take this. Wyvern's Gaze is just better always. Like, not only is it increasing the damage of Wyvern, but it's making it last longer, so you have that damage amp even longer than you would with Hoof and Blade. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments. Are there any other changes you want to see? Are you happy with the state of the Survival Hunter talent tree? Are there any things that I missed? Let me know what you guys thought, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.